Welcome to the Ponder on That podcast, where we talk about mental health, our goals, self-confidence, self-love, and many more various topics. In every episode, we will be giving advice that we can apply practically in our everyday lives. I'm Saffron King. Let's begin. Okay, so we are here today with the lovely Alison Cope, and she will be talking us through her experiences of when she lost her beloved son Josh, and just going through her feelings of where she's at now, and how she wants to use her message and her story to help others who've either experienced what she's experienced or who are connected to her vision. So Alison, introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself.
Okay, so I'm Alison Cope. Most people know me through losing my son Joshua in 2013, and that was to knife crime. Since losing Josh, I've worked with many organisations and young people sharing his inspirational life story and the reality of his devastating death, in the hope that it inspires people to realise, firstly, what power we have in changing young people's thoughts, mindsets around youth violence, but also to kind of break down the myths that society has around this subject, because those myths are actually blocking a lot of the preventative work that's needed.
Absolutely. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Alison. Well, thank you for that introduction. I'm just going to jump straight in. And it's just kind of, the first question is just going back to what actually happened, obviously, in 2013 and how that made you feel. So how did the death of Josh, also known as Depz, I knew him as Depz as well from the music that he made, how did that make you feel? Can you walk us through just that night? And I know obviously you've spoken about it before, but just kind of to get a feel of what you were going through.
Yeah, I mean, the brain, the body does the most unusual stroke amazing things when you're placed in that position, because any parent, anybody, if you take your mind to allow you to think that you're going to lose a child that's been stabbed or to youth violence, your brain finds that so uncomfortable to even process. So when you're actually facing that, it started on that evening at approximately 20 to 11 on the night. My front door knocked and a girl was standing there sobbing. And I automatically assumed that she was here just to see Josh, but she actually just said the words, "He's been stabbed." What happens then is your body goes into a kind of split personality. You've got one part of your brain that's screaming and panicking, and it's too unbearable to even process. But the other part of you is thinking, okay, I need to be calm. I need to enable myself to get to the hospital. And the bottom line is, Josh might need me and I might need to do certain things. So, I got to the hospital and there was a huge sense of panic and trauma surrounding me, because the amount of young people that had turned up at the hospital through social media. And then it was just such a prolonged, traumatic, and I look back now and I think, how did I actually sit at the hospital waiting for an update on my son? Because your body just wants to totally freak out to the point where they're probably going to be sedating you and knocking you out, when you have to keep as calm as you possibly can. And each minute just dragged, and every thought was going through my mind. Okay, is he asking for his mum? Is he scared? Is he crying? Is he panicking? Is he dead? Is he going to be brain damaged? Every single scenario is rushing through your head, and you're trying to battle every thought with a kind of ulterior positive thought, but then it takes you straight back to that negative thought. And then, I was moved up to the family room, which was, I believe, a couple of floors up, and Josh had been taken to intensive care under, he's been stabilised. So that's what I assumed, that he was stable as much as he could be, and that I would get to see him. But what that actually meant was that he wasn't dead, but there wasn't much of a pulse, and the brain injury that he'd sustained due because of blood loss open heart surgery, 7 heart attacks, and then on the morning of the 21st of September at 5:58, that's when Joshua took his last breath and he died. And I was kind of catapulted into a very unusual situation, because it wasn't that I could then suddenly have to face this devastating journey and learn how to grieve and learn how to process the loss of my son. I had to take into consideration thousands, and I mean thousands and thousands of other people. So in a way, it was a blessing because it gave me a focus, but also what that has meant is that I haven't actually grieved the loss of my son. I haven't processed those emotions. I haven't even began that journey of actually the realization that I went through the most traumatic events possible, and they continue, you know, because Josh is never going to come back. So it was it was and it's such and is a very, very incredibly difficult situation to have to go through and continue to go through.
Yeah. And what do you remember what your so the day after you'd found out and you know that he had passed away, do you remember what your days were like after that? Like, do you remember kind of what normality was like after?
Yeah, the normality was dealing with thousands of fans daily. Within probably 6 hours of Joshua dying, my home became a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week sanctuary for all the different pockets of friends, because Joshua had friends from all over the city, the West Midlands, London, and I had people just driving to pay their respects, show their condolences. But then it kind of turned into a situation where a lot of people were so devastated by the loss of Josh or Depzman that they were kind of drawn towards me as a kind of the closest thing they could possibly get to that wasn't Josh. And it became a real comfort for them to be around me, to be at the home. And that's what my life became. There was, you know, different procedures, like if somebody was so traumatized they were self-harming or they were outbursts of violence or alcohol or drugs, then they were kind of a priority. Then there was those that were devastated, and then those were in total sense of shock. So it was a rotation, and that carried on probably for a good year and a half. Throw in, there was a murder trial, the police, the investigation and the charge, the court process, the hearings, the autopsy, all these different elements. Then on top of that, a funeral to organise. And it wasn't just a funeral, it was a public event and all the, the implications of that. And it was just the shock and the trauma just enabled me to get through those moments. And I look back and I just think I'm not quite sure how I did that, but again, the brain does an unusual thing in that situation. It enables you to survive and appear strong and appear calm, when in fact you're in so much shock and you're in so much trauma that you can appear in a very different way than you actually are inside.
And it amazes me, because I didn't know about what you just said in terms of people would come to obviously your home, and it almost like people would look to you as like a safe place, a sanctuary in a sense. And it's like there isn't
a single day when young people don't reach out to me, even up till now. Not a single day.
That's amazing.
Yeah, every single day. And I think it, and what I am proud of is the fact that thousands of thousands were heartbroken, and they all managed to, come through to some certain degree in a positive way because of the actions that were taken to deal with that. And that kind of led me to see that there was a massive amount of young people that needed guidance in society. And if they have a voice that they respect and can reason with, that's a very powerful position to be in. And I had to use that for the positive rather than the negative, for lots of reasons, but they all represented my son. And the last thing I wanted is for any retaliation that would result in another person being hurt. I didn't want any emotional retaliation that people would live to regret. And I certainly didn't want my son represented in any form of negativity, because as soon as you see a headline or a news story of a victim of knife crime, a young mixed race male, grime music, 18, Birmingham, a lot of society would be like, oh, what do you expect, really? Oh, wow. It's just another one gone, isn't it? Shouldn't have been doing what they were doing. It's only when I break it actually down what happened that people go, oh. And that's one of the myths that I try and break down, that, you know, we've got to stop looking at victims of knife crime as, you know, that they've done something to deserve that outcome. We're basically, some of society is saying that children deserve to be murdered. You know, it's their own fault. And I think that's a real, you know, uphill battle that I will continue to try and break down. But what I'm so grateful for, mine and Joshua's relationship, is when he was expressing himself when he was a lot younger. He wasn't expressing his truth. He was talking an absolute load of nonsense. And it was only as he matured and became Depzman and expressed his truth that I could actually think, you know what, that is what it is his truth. But some of the stuff he came out when he was younger, the difference is I was on his case at every opportunity and explaining the implications of a lyric, the implications of portraying yourself online in a certain way. And so when people judge that that's not okay, I agree, it isn't okay. My point would be that what guidance are a lot of these young people having, and are they truly seeing the implications of their actions? So at the age of 12, when he's saying, oh, I did a drive-by, no, you didn't, Josh. And he'd come home and I'd be like, Josh, if we say this, blah, blah, blah. And at that point, it's like, oh, whatever. It's just lyrics. But with maturity and guidance and, you know, education, he realised that actually his lyrics needed to become a true reflection of his life, not what he thinks he should be saying. And so people can't criticise that. They can if they want to, but it doesn't even closely bother me, because, you know, I have no regrets about my son. My son's language, my son's choices were not things that I was overly happy with. But what I had to do was make sure that I didn't give up on him because I wasn't happy with his choices. I had to be by his side, guiding him and pulling him through to make better choices. And if anyone doesn't understand that, with respect, I couldn't care less.
Wow, no, that's amazing. And I think, because obviously, you know, I feel, did he ever hide his music from you as well, or was he always transparent with you?
No, my son had no filter ever in life. My son was exactly the same as you saw him. So that those lyrics, what a lot of, you know, on a more serious kind of note, a lot of people don't understand are the struggles that we faced as a unit. You know, we were a unit. Josh was excluded at 8. He had special educational needs. He was arrested on numerous occasions. His behaviour, his attitude, he did what so many people do. On goes this front, this bravado, this attitude. And I was just so taken aback by his response to the world. It was a very difficult situation. But, you know, it was so important that I understood him and guided him and enabled him to be a better person. So Joshua's language to me was horrendous. His behaviour was horrific and incredibly difficult to deal with. So there wasn't two Joshuas. There wasn't Joshua on YouTube and Joshua at home. There was Joshua, full stop, end of. What you saw is what you got. And if he was telling somebody and his videos to F off, he would equally use that language towards me. And it was a total learning, Josh, teaching, guidance, support, acknowledgement, showing the how wrong that was. And eventually, through sheer determination, he grasped it, and then that enabled him and empowered him to become the person that so many people were inspired by. So any comments, No, I don't care.
So when you say like you guys were a unit and you went through so much, what did
Yeah.
that unit look like? Like just you and him, or would it be like you, him, and his friends, or you, him, and some family members? What did that look like?
There was like different layers. So you had kind of the outer family that were very much like, oh gosh, that's terrible, or oh gosh, that's a shame, or come on, Joshua. But when it came to the hardcore full front reaction, it was me and him. And when I say that, what I mean by that is A&E, Josh has had a fight, police station, Josh has been arrested, big problem at school. It would be me that would be who went. He had his granddad, his grandma, and other family members that were kind of a backup, but I was the only person that could 100% be the person that supported him, because I totally understood him, and the amount I loved him gave me the strength to be that person. And he wanted me in those situations, and I wanted to be there in those situations. So no matter how many times he got arrested, I was always there by his side. And I've been to the police stations many times, and I've been the appropriate adult for many other young people, because they're left on their own at those police stations. And I could have and that's their family's choices and different circumstances. But for me, I always saw in Josh what it was I was fighting for, and that was a little boy with a golden heart and such an ability to love and such an ability to succeed. But we just had to battle through the layers to allow him to come out the other side. Wow. So it was very, very difficult.
And I have to commend you, Alison, because as much as yes, you are his mother, and it is a mother's duty to do that. I think some mothers would have just given up, or they would have just said, okay, my son is doing this. He's going to A&E. He's getting into these fights. I've said what I need to say. That's it. But I think everyone needs that person that we all need that person who won't give up on us. And
I respect when parents make that decision, but we have to respect why they make that decision, because I don't have a right to judge them and they don't have a right to judge me. But I think society would be a lot better if a young person goes to a police station on their own, or A&E, and no family member feels able to turn up. It isn't because they don't care about that child. They've probably come to the end of their resources and their ability to support that child, and so it's just that they don't know how to maybe go the next stage that might benefit that child. So I think in those circumstances, society should be more supportive of families and not so judgmental. We had a very unique situation, but it doesn't mean it was right for everybody. It was just right for us. And people didn't get it, but again, I didn't really care, because I knew what my son needed. And other families might think, well, I need to cut off ties, because that could be the thing that makes my child think. And we have to respect people's decisions, but also be there in case additional support is needed.
Absolutely. No, thank you for being honest with that, because I think it is easy to just judge off what we see at the surface, but like you said, it's knowing those reasons for that. As a child, I mean, Depz, from what I remember from his music and just how people spoke of him, he was definitely on the path of greatness. Like, everyone spoke of his talent. Did you always know as a child he was destined for greatness? Like, did you see something special about him as an individual?
Yes and no. He always had a real glow about him, and people always say that, oh, lit up the room, da, da, da. When Joshua lit up the room, it wasn't always with a smile and a positive attitude. It could be lit up the room by flying at someone and kicking him in the shins. So you see, his behaviour really kind of was my priority. So underneath that, I always had this belief that until his behaviour was stabilised, he will never achieve his full potential. So it was only when he started to stabilise that his potential was getting very obvious. And then it became the point when, right, then we know where we're going with this. And absolutely, you are going to be incredibly successful. But if I'm honest, and I've thought about this recently, from his behaviour stabilising to his death was probably only about a year, if that.
Okay, and what did that look like? What did his stabilisation look like in that year period?
It was amazing. I mean, he went from being so volatile, so unstable, so emotionally damaged. Every part of negative, his language, his approach, to suddenly being calm and at peace, settled and really, really focused. His manners kicked in, his appreciation, his ability to show love, and all the hard work that had been put into Josh was starting to come out. You know, he felt no self-consciousness about declaring his undying love for me in front of thousands, telling everybody how much he appreciated me and loved me, and his family, his granddad, his grandma, mentioning other family members. He was just at peace. And if you could have, when you have a child, you want them to be respectful, you want them to be thoughtful, you want them to try their uttermost in what they want to be in life. That's what it looked like. And when it went out the door, it was a case of, he's destined to be an amazing music artist and be, you know, internationally known. And this is just the beginning now. So we had such a short period of that, and then it was all gone.
And, you know, you've answered my question, because I was going to ask you, you know, what your relationship with Josh was like, because I recently saw on your Twitter, well, I've seen it before, but I saw on your Twitter the pinned note that he sent to you or wrote for you. I think that was, and obviously the handwriting looked like, was he very young at the time?
He was 10. Yes. He was 10. He just got into a fight with someone at school and punched them and got into trouble. But you see, that is a prime example. You know, if you look past the behaviour, there are many things in that letter that say there is so much hope left, and so much. If we punish and if we stigmatise young people because their behaviour is a reflection of pain, what we're actually doing is making their life so much worse, and we're starting to remove the chances to heal them, support them and move them forward. And I could never ever, you know, no matter what Joshua did, he never ever got into trouble. And some people might think, well, it's no wonder he got into trouble, but I knew Joshua was so reactive in his behaviour and so, you know, inconsistent with his reactions that you couldn't really pin down a response to it. You just had to keep trying everything. And the thing that I realised was having the most impact was to love him and to make him feel secure. And when he was kicking off, to grab him as tight as I could and hold him as tight as I could and talk him down and talk to him and talk to his heart and to his soul, and then for him to realise what his actions were doing to the people that he loved. And eventually that became enough for him to start to balance it out. But yeah, we were more than just a mum and son. We always used to say I used to say to him, "Are you okay, Josh?" And he'd be like, "As long as you're okay, Mum, I'm okay." And I would say the same thing back to him. We were only okay with each other in our lives. That was the only time we were all right. As long as we knew we had each other, everything would be okay.
So, like, would you say, like, you both completed each other, like, so sort of like best friends as well as mother and son?
100%. Before Josh came into my life, before the issues, you know, I struggled with so many things. I had my own history and my own stuff going on. And then when Josh came into the world, and his behaviour really enabled me to become the person that I always felt I should be, which no matter what achievements I go on to do or I have done, he will always be my greatest achievement, always. There will be nothing else that compares to being his mum. Nothing.
And you know, looking at you and seeing his face, you two are twins. I don't know if he'd tell you that.
He looks so much like his dad. He's got his dad height. Because I'm 5 foot and Josh was 6'3".
Wow. Oh,
So
wow.
I'm tiny and he was massive, and he was obviously brown and I'm really
Yes.
not. And I'm so grateful he had such a beautiful combination. He has Italian in him, Spanish, Jamaican, Irish, English, and combine all those beautiful mixtures, and I produced an absolutely gorgeous person.
You know what? I have to be honest with you, Alison. I know all the girls liked him, and also when I used to see him on Grime Vlog, I was like, oh my gosh, he's so handsome.
He was gorgeous. He was gorgeous outside and absolutely stunning inside. You know, and anyone that knew Josh just saw that radiate out of him. And that was when he passed away. You know, even to this day, I think, gosh, how on earth? You know, when people say somebody radiates personality through YouTube and those videos, he just came out of the screen to people and really, you know, shone through on that screen. And I think that's what they call charisma, star quality. He had all of those things, you know, but for me, it was very much, he needs to be calm and he needs to just hold it down, say please, say thank you, stop being an absolute little idiot, and just call you Josh. And then by the time it got there, everything else was going to be as it should have been.
So you were the one to ground him as well.
Yeah. He very much realised what I try to get any young person I speak to realise. His choices weren't just hurting him. They were hurting the people that he adored. And I haven't met any young person who would make a choice knowing that they were going to break their mum's hearts, their nans, their aunties, their uncles, and be removed from the people that they love. And so it was that realisation for Josh that made him sit back and think, oh, hang on a second, I can handle this and I can handle that, but my mum can't and my family can't. So what's actually more important, myself or, you know, the people I love? And eventually the balance became, he realised that it was the people that he loved were more important than just his own choices sometimes.
Thank you for that, Alison. So in my next question is, with everything that you've experienced, you know, from the loss of your son to, you know, the grieving process and the court process and everything, what would you say to another mom who has lost a son to knife crime, or who's lost a loved one to knife crime, or even you know, to someone else taking that their life?
You know, it's a very individual journey, and sometimes people will look at me and think, gosh, I wish I was like her, or she's done so much. But we mustn't look at each other like that, because when you lose a child, you know, I was actually given a blessing in a way, because so many people were on my case. It was such a distraction. It kind of pulled me through those moments where some mums give up, when some families just can't take another day, you know, forward in their life. So again, anybody that lives in pain, who's had any loss, for me, it's about taking that each moment at a time and not thinking too far ahead in some cases, because when you're in that much pain, the reality is that you're going to be in that much pain for your life. It's about trying to learn how to balance it out. So, you know, even with myself, you know, I will cry most days for Joshua, but people won't necessarily see that, and I will try and balance that out with going to a coffee shop, doing something for me, trying. And that's such an important word, trying. If you're trying means that you stay in bed all day and you can't cope with the world, be just proud of yourself for achieving another day without your child. And it's not about hundreds and thousands of people knowing about your child. It's keeping your child's memory alive in you and the people that really knew that child. And hopefully that will give you that teeny bit of focus to move day by day forward. And it's the hardest thing in the world, and people, you know, don't really understand it until you actually feel it. So a lot of society, a lot of people be like, oh, that's so sad, or that's a shame. But in reality, it's hard for people to understand. So it's a very lonely road that we face, because, you know, I could meet 1,000 people that have lost their children, but I will never ever meet anyone in the world that's lost my child.
Wow, that is very true. Yes, so it's not being hard on yourself, and it's not comparing your grief journey to someone else's, because it's true, because it's still, even though it's I don't think I'd say the same grief, but even though it's probably in the similar sphere, I think that it's still very different. Even if there was a mom your age, if the son the same age, even in the same class, you'd still feel it differently.
Totally different, because I was the only person that was the mum to Joshua. So my grief is mine, absolutely. There can be understanding, there can be all kinds of things, you know, and when it comes to murder, it throws in so many other elements that make this journey so much harder, because you've got the stigma attached, you've got judgment, you've got the perpetrator's family, social media, 700 million views on and opinions on things. You've then got the funeral, you've then got the murder trial, and then you've got the verdict, and then you have to live with all of that day in, day out, because that's not going anywhere. You know, that's something that's actually going to be coming in the future, different parts of that journey. So there's an awful lot. And again, you just have to look at society. When a young person's killed, and say, and I'm going to just use these as examples and not to be disrespectful to anybody, a terrorism attack, a really bad illness, even, you know, we saw so sadly that little boy lost his life to a lightning strike. Yes. And the media has a very different outlook on deaths in that way. So if you have a young man who did music that got stabbed to death on the street, or if you had a 10-year-old that passed away from cancer, you will see celebrities all over this one saying that's so sad, RIP, you know, memorials, events, you know, and a community outpouring of grief. When a young man gets stabbed to do with knife crime and is viewed as inner city, you know, grime, etc., it's really difficult. And I have only achieved what I have achieved through a determination that even I get surprised by, because I haven't had any big organisations scoop me up and help me. I haven't had celebrities scoop me up and support me. I haven't had a lot of actual practical support, but I'm here and I've achieved an awful lot. Without that, I just wish for other people that weren't as determined as me, they were given that a little bit more, because it could help their journey moving forward. To have sympathy and support will go a long way in somebody's survival. I've got that because I have chosen to grab it and make it come my way, but a lot of people don't have that.
So Alison, that takes me on to my other question. So as a society, what can we do better? So when I say society, it could even be as individuals. Like, what can we do better to help prevent knife crime, or to help raise more of an awareness? I know that you've just recently had your own booklets being printed, you know, for the Joshua, how do you pronounce his surname?
Ribera.
I didn't want to get it wrong. Yeah, I know that, and obviously that's being delivered for schools as well, and like young people. But in terms of like as a whole, how can we kind of be a part of that change? You know, I know obviously, yeah,
easily. And that's the thing, you see, the problem with knife crime, if you were to get 1,000 parents in the room and say to them, I want you to talk to your child about youth violence, understandably a lot of parents will be like, I don't need to speak to my child because they're not involved in this, they're not involved in that, they won't do that, they won't do that. I would rather everyone have that conversation with their children, because the risk factors are not as obvious as we might assume. We've had many stabbings, arrests, murders with no links to gangs, no links whatsoever to drug dealing. And of course they play a role in some of the things that we're seeing. But let's just put that to the side for a moment. I think every single person in society, if they have a child in their care or a child that they know of, the best way for me is to open up that conversation is to ask one question. And that question is, what percentage of other young people carry a knife? Now, out of the almost 500,000 young people I've spoken to, I ask that question. And I always get answers as in 70%, 90%, 50%. It's very rare to hear anything less than 50%, which says that a lot of our young people are walking around wary of each other, intimidated by people's presence, how they're presenting themselves, and throw in, there's no police, there's no youth services, nobody will help you. Some young people are walking around terrified of each other and might pick up a weapon. It is only 3% of the population that carry a knife. So what we can do is firstly ask that question. And if they say 70, 90, 80, try to break down that answer. What makes you think it's that high? And that could be the difference in them walking to school, getting a bus, going down the shops, going to the park, terrified, or to say to a grown-up, oh, there's all these kids around the shops, they're on bikes, I've seen them on Instagram with a knife, so they're scary to me. Oh, okay. And then the grown-up knows that that child needs some support in society, but also to make other community members, the local police, the local youth services aware that there's a minority group of young people making other people intimidated and scared. And if we all did that, our young people might start to be a bit reassured, because it's teeny little pockets of people that are scaring the majority and giving such a negative impact on. So I can walk down the road day in, day out without ever coming across somebody with a knife. If I ride around a bike, which firstly I would never do, and hanging around the shops, smoking weed, on Instagram, ballied up, going, the lyrics, I'm going to do this to you, I'm going to do that to you. Those are the kind of things we need to start challenging. And every young person has access to social media. So every grown up in that young person's life can say, you know, what percentage of young people carry a knife? Oh, I think it's about 90%. What makes you think that? Because I've seen this, I've heard that. Okay, what you've heard, I'm going to break it down, be reassured. And it's about young people feeling confident to speak to people if they're worried. And those people are usually their families, but if they haven't got that relationship, making sure that there are people there. And that's where the whole community approach, community-led approach to knife crime, youth services, police, all come together. But the biggest problem I find is with young people, with, you know, we're very desensitized, and lots of people will be, this will not happen to me. And a lot of the campaigns we see that are promoted aren't touching the surfaces, because, for example, if I suddenly showed you a video, say I showed you 4 videos, and that video was saying to you, I want you to be racist to people, I want you to be abusive, I want you to be really horrible to the elderly, and I want you to break the law. Will those 4 videos make you suddenly go against everything that you believe personally? Because you are no. But for a young person that's terrified, that might be involved in gangs, that might be involved in drugs, that might have got themselves in a very difficult situation, we're saying, don't carry a knife, kids. And they're going, well, that's not an option because I'm scared. That's not an option because I've got myself into such a difficult situation. I don't think anyone's going to help me, because I'm being told there's no help for young people. It's not going to make a young person think, well, that's going to happen to me, because when somebody gets murdered, they didn't have that in their plan for that evening. When somebody gets arrested for that murder, that wasn't in their, you know, future planning in life. It's about making young people relate. And the only way I've seen that is when I deliver in schools, or other people deliver in schools, and it suddenly becomes real to that young person. For the first time, they realise that their actions, whatever they are, whether small, medium or huge, it can happen to you, and you have to be very careful of making sure that you are representing yourself positively, that you are making the right choices. But if you're not, we won't judge you. We won't penalise you. We will support you, not just for your sake, but for your future victim's sake. Absolutely. And for me, I just wish that would happen.
Absolutely, it's beautiful you said that, Alison, because I mean, it makes me wonder as well in my head, like, you know, when you go out to do these talks in schools, and I saw recently that you go to like prisons as well and young people.
Yeah.
How does it make you feel when you speak, like, for example, when you're in prison, when you're speaking to other murderers who, you know, have obviously killed another woman's son? How does that make you feel towards that perpetrator? And does it also bring back memories to you about the perpetrator who killed Josh as well?
It makes me really sad. And it makes me sad because I've been to youth offender prisons. I've been to class A, big, hardcore prisons. And, you know, when I go to the youth offending ones, what really makes me sad is the fact they listen with such respect and they're absorbing it in. And afterwards, they thank me. I haven't changed their situation. I haven't brought back the person that they've hurt. But all it does is really upset me and sadden me for the future young people that aren't receiving an input, because I think, well, if they are 14, 15, 16-year-olds that have been sentenced to 18 years, 20 years, have sat there with such an open heart and an open mind, we could have probably given them an input that would have made a difference in their life. But what we're not doing is making sure that the other 14-year-old out there that is going to become a murderer is receiving this input. It's not my place to make their situation harder. It's not for me, you know, to make a 15-year-old suicidal and unable to cope with their emotions. That's not my role in this world. They have made their own choices. They have been sentenced in response to their choices, and the, you know, society has dealt with them accordingly. For me, it's about the next person that could be in that position, because then if we do educate and we do, you know, we're not just saving the young person from going to prison, we're saving young men like Josh. And that's very much how I view this whole situation. If only we had have made sure that the input was there for Armani, would he have ever chosen a life sentence? No, I don't think he would have.
Yeah,
and then Josh would still be here.
And a lot of people do say, like, you know, when that person's being sentenced, like when they actually comes to reality, a lot of them do regret what they've done. I mean, obviously I can't say everybody, but I know from, you know, hearing what people say, they do say when they speak to people, they do regret what they've done. It's just that not everyone's will vocally admit that.
Yeah, and I think, and again, you know, if we suddenly start to make the majority think twice of their actions, then we wouldn't be seeing the knife crime figures and statistics that we're currently seeing. And we've got to be realistic about it and not have this kind of like fluffy approach. Stop knife crime. We can't stop knife crime.
Yeah.
Knife crime has been here for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Murder will always be here. Drugs will always be here. Gangs, whether it be, you know, inner city Birmingham, or let's go back to the Vikings. Let's go back to hundreds of years ago with those kind of gangs. Just because they were white with fluffy faces, you know, they were still different areas, different gangs, different, you know, however you want to look at it historically. We need to remove that. We're not going to stop this, but what we can do is reduce it back. I am a firm believer, again, with respect to anyone who doesn't agree with me, I'm not really minding if they don't. If a young person is shown the reality, and when I say that, if they are shown the reality of being taken from their families and the devastation to their victims, the reality of prison, the reality of the smells, the sexual abuse, the intimidation, the sharing a cell, not the you'll get hench and have champagne popped over your head when you walk out. The reality, the trauma to their families, the trauma to everybody associated, their families dying when they're locked up. if they're shown that in a real way and an impactful, honest, not to scare them, just very factual, if they then still make the choice, I can live quite calmly with that, because we are losing too many young people to prison because they really weren't aware of what they were getting into. And I think that is really sad for anybody to make a choice and do something and not realise the implications until it's too late, has a devastating impact on not just them, but the ripple effect that the perpetrator, the victim, and both families. And I think, I think that's something we're really, really missing, because I've heard people speak about prison, and I can't see how anybody would make that as a future choice. But what we can do is reduce and show, and really show, we can show that I don't scare children, I don't frighten them, I don't show them graphic images. I make them feel, and I make them think, not about society, about themselves. And it's not selfish, because if you don't think about yourselves, you could potentially really make some mistakes. And if you don't value yourself for whatever reason, who is in your life? You might not value yourself for many, many reasons, but I bet you value your nan or your little sister or your brother. So that money that you're making, that life you're leading or pretending to lead, are you actually saying that that's more important than those people? And if you are, what can we say? There's nothing we can say. There's not a lot we can do. We have to be honest about that. But when I go into prisons and I see the sense of regret, remorse, and the fact that it's so hard for young people to process that, because to go into prison, you're scared, you're vulnerable. But that's not necessarily how you come across. You will beef up in the gym because it's your shield. Your shield becomes bigger and bigger, and the bigger your shield, the more your brain and emotions will close, because it's the brain's way of protecting yourself. And so you end up with some very dead emotional souls in prison, because they've done this to themselves, and there isn't a space or the time in prison to heal and show and enable growth. We just have lots of souls that that light's been switched off in prison, and I find that very hard, very, very difficult. And I wish that prison was full of people who realised what they were getting into, not prison full of people that they weren't, and people that will go, well, they should know. What do they expect to happen then? They're right to have those views. And the thing is, though, they're right to think that, because these are people that are causing massive problems on society. But why don't we just for a moment, try and support these young people more? Because these people that say just throw the key away, there's going to be a victim that's come in their path, and the key's going to be thrown away. And we don't want that victim to be your child. So do you want us to invest in the potential perpetrator? Because if we don't, they could be walking past your child one day, and it could be your child that becomes the robbery victim. It could be your child that's hurt. So to throw away these people could be very dangerous to you personally. And you don't want that, do you? And it's trying to remove those myths and judgments.
That's a powerful thing what you said, Alison, because it's like, as a society, we are connected to each other. So it is a ripple. It can be a ripple effect if we don't stop that cycle. Absolutely. And just moving on, kind of obviously time. In this day and age where mental health is, spoken about a lot, and I think, mental health awareness is definitely a priority, which is very good. I think people are talking about their things more, their issues, mental health struggles. How have you personally helped your mental health, obviously with losing Josh and going through the grieving process? What's helped your mental health?
I think just my ability to be resilient, and to, when you go through something like this, there's so many new experiences, and you don't really know what is happening, you know, the 1 year anniversary, the trial, all these different moments that come at you and are so overwhelming, but over time they don't ease, but you are prepared more for what's going to come your way. So now I know when it comes to the anniversary, I cannot work. So I protect myself by not working for 3 days. So it's just the knowledge and the ability to go through each moment. And there are definitely lots of times where the devastation is so overwhelming and the pain is so overwhelming that I sit here and I just think, I don't think I can carry on anymore doing this because it's so hard. And yet I'll wake up the next day and think, nah, I'm doing it. And then there's this sheer determination in me, and I'm just so grateful to the schools, the colleges, and everyone around the UK that has, you know, allowed me to speak to their children and their young people, because when I get the feedback that I get and the response, it makes me realise that I was right to get up that day. And I think I'm in a very fortunate position to still be able to share my experiences and my son's experiences, and the feedback and the response really does make me think, you know what, I'm right to carry on because I'm having a massive impact. And so, you know, not everyone has that, so I'm grateful for that, and that helps me. And I focus as much as I can on positive things. The awards night I do in Josh's memory, you know, that'll be what takes up a lot of my brain space. I'll travel across the UK every day delivering to young people, and I do that every single day, and I'll continue to do that. So a lot of the things that I am able to do give me the strength to carry on.
That's amazing. And would you ever work internationally as well?
If I got a phone call tomorrow saying come and speak about Josh, I'd be on the next flight.
Wow.
Nothing would stop me, because his story is incredibly inspirational, and it gives people hope for a future. And then to show the devastation of his death stops the young people, you know, doing certain things, and think about their families and the impact. I'd travel anywhere.
Absolutely. And I think with Josh as well, his impact wasn't just the UK based, because people still outside of the UK would listen to his music. And I think obviously it's an international issue, you know, knife crime and what you've experienced. So I think actually international work would be amazing for you to do.
Yeah. I'd love to do that. And I think, again, it's showing young people, you know, breaking down this whole, you know, we talk about all the influences that young people face, and we've got to be real here, that the negative influences young people face, the negative influences aren't necessarily different. The music, the clothing, the representation of a certain way of life. What has changed is how accessible those negative influences are. You know, when we spoke about Tupac, Biggie, you know, Snoop Dogg, is like, oh my God, this music's going to come onto our shores and destroy our societies. But the point is, firstly, why are there so many young people so easily influenced by negativity? Why aren't we addressing that? But also, how has this been allowed to happen? You can now go out and buy clothing that's it represents a stab-proof vest, and that's gone into mainstream shops, and they're making millions off our children, millions and millions of pounds, and you know, and young people are just doing what young people do. They're copying what they're seeing, and we're selling them the dream, but we need to sell them both sides of the dream. And then once we do, they can, you know, decide how to behave and what they're choosing to be influenced by. And that's an international thing. You know, if you take away a young person's hope by allowing them to live in poverty, allowing them to you know, struggle mentally, emotionally, with no hope for the future, what do we expect them to do? You know, they'll just be on self-destruct mode. Nobody in this country should be living the levels of poverty, the level of negativity that they are, but we are allowing that to happen. So, you know, in our country, in other countries and across the world, we just need to, you know, embrace young people and rise their, you know, expectations and support them to achieve, and not just periodically when it suits us.
Absolutely. So So I used to like sporadically like listen to Josh sometimes, like when people around me would listen to his music and things that he'd speak about. If he was still alive now, what kind of music do you think he would make now? Like what kind of things would he speak about? Would his message have changed? Because obviously, being he would be 25 now.
I'd love to say I'd know what would come out of Josh's mouth, but I can't say that with confidence because
yes,
Joshua did what Joshua wanted to do, which, gave him a reputation that people loved about him, and the album being called Too Real, there was a reason for that. I think that he would be positive, but not, I can't say it, like fluffy positive. I think he'd still be absolutely real to his core and raw. And I think whatever he'd experienced over the last 7 years would be what was coming out of his mouth. And obviously that's quite hard to, I would hope it would be on the same kind of the way Getz talks about his difficulties, but look how amazing he's doing. And you've got Dave and you've got, George the poet. They're speaking their truth,
yes,
but they're done in such a creative, magical and inspiring way. It's not all that negativity. If Josh was talking about stabbing, shooting and all that nonsense, I would not be happy. And I don't think he would have, because his realization of what those lyrics, how they could influence, and that's would be my hope. I don't think he'd be on drill, but I can't say that confidently because Josh would just do what Joshua wanted to do. I think Josh would be multi-millionaire, international, gold teeth, covered in tattoos, 6 girlfriends, 3 babies, security that he didn't need, and wearing sunglasses even when it's dark. That's where I think Josh would be now.
And no, he was definitely, destined for that kind of, multi-million life. He had the talent for it and the rawness. Yeah. Also, he had the looks for it as well, because we do have, that's
the thing. You see, he was very fortunate. He was good looking, but he could also stand his own ground. He was very kind and loving, but on the flip side, didn't tolerate nonsense and would probably launch himself at you if he found you to be disrespectful, which he was working on that. And he had love. He had a massive heart and love for those that he should have loved, and I think with all those factors, he would have faced difficulties. And I always worried about Josh. He always, I lost my mum and I lost my dad, both since losing Josh. And I think he would have really struggled with that. So emotionally, he was very sensitive, but it would have just been his journey, and I'd have been there following him around the world to make sure that he was okay. I was his psychologist, psychiatrist, therapist, bouncer, security, everything. And I would have continued to be if he had wanted me.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Number one fan.
I was his number one fan, but I was Joshua's number one fan, and he just became known as Depzman. But until Josh was loved, until Josh was secured, Depzman would never have been who he became. So.
Where did he get the name Depz from? Actually, I don't know how.
I've seen one interview, and I think he was just making it up. So I don't know. I've been watching the interview, thinking he doesn't sound too sure himself here. I think it morphed from Deppy Clapham, which was when he was like 7, 8, 9, but Clapham. Yeah, and then it kind of morphed, and I think we went for the Depsy boy, and then obviously the mature version was the Depzman. So I don't really think there's any deep and meaningful thought behind it. I think it was just a nickname that kind of developed.
It does work though, because it's only just right now, as I'm asking you, why I've thought, why Depz? So actually, it does work.
I don't. It was just him, isn't it? It's just him. I mean, people always go, "Oh, you're Depz's mum," and I'm just like, yeah. Well, in my head, I'm like, you mean Josh. But I'll allow. I don't. Obviously, he is who he is to people. He's Depzman. So, but will always be my Josh.
Absolutely. And I mean, you've already answered it, but how would you like people to remember your son Josh?
As someone that just got there in the end. You know, you can look at his history, you can look at his mistakes, you can look at his choices, you can absolutely look and think, what the hell, because I did. But it's about where we end up in life and how we try, and if we allow our mistakes and our negative influences to define us, then there'll be a lot of defined people in the world that haven't got a good title, because we all make mistakes, we all do things we shouldn't. It's about that progression and that ability to look and reflect and move forward. And so I will always be incredibly proud of the young man that reflected, that learned, that changed, and allow his heart to come through the different layers of pain that he faced in his life. And so I want people to see that that's who Josh was. He was somebody that fought and struggled and came through. And what was left before he died was a respectful, calm, hardworking young man that any parent would be proud of.
Oh, that's beautiful. And was there anyone, like, person within either music industry or in his life that he looked up to, like as an inspiration or like a mentor, apart from you?
Oh, musically, it certainly wasn't me. Again, Josh just kind of came out of the blue with all of it. But like, I remember as a little boy, what used to blast out of his bedroom was Gigs, JME, Kano, Skepta, you know. But the music thing, like I said, I was just always kind of like one eye open over it, just watching it. But no, that's the lyrical ability and the skill and the wordplay that the music industry has is unbelievable, and I could never have been like that. It was just his talent. But those are the people that he looked up to. And the thing I loved about Josh as well, he didn't want to be the next big whoever. He wanted to be him.
Oh.
He was going to be Depzman. He didn't want to be the next, you know. He always said, oh, he's going to be bigger than Drake, and then he'd be like,
oh yeah.
He didn't even say it with any self-doubt. He'd see a photograph, he'd be like that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know where he got that confidence from, but he meant it. When people have that vision and it's not, they hope, it absolutely was going to be the way it was. You know, and you know, that's just how I want people to remember him, as that young man. And to, you know, he looked up to other people for ideas, and oh, this is a talented person and I'm going to learn from this person, and the way they do this with words, I'm going to really learn. And he did. He learned a lot from those people, and then he just stood tall and thought, right, I am going to be bigger than everyone else.
And I actually think it's important to have that self-belief as well. So I think I think that's why Josh made it so big in such a short period of time, because of his self-belief in who he was. So my last question, oh, sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, I think, you know, absolutely self-belief, but I think his journey was mapped out in a way in the stars, because people can have that self-belief and they still can't get there because it's a very competitive market. But I believe Joshua had to go through what he went through to become who he became, to feel his success, to achieve what he achieved. And then he was ready to go, you know, not ever ready in my eyes, or probably never ready in his eyes, but he achieved everything he needed to achieve personally. And I think that was just part of it. So I think there was an awful lot of luck and a lot of, you know, spiritual input that enabled Joshua to be who he was, because his journey was so quick, so unique, and he just, you know, went straight in and became who he became so quick. And I think that's very unusual, and I think people saw that. So I do think that was just his stars coming together, and that was his journey.
Absolutely. And you know, even within the UK, as much as we've got amazing talent here, and you know, in the West Midlands, I think even within that small, you know, area, it's hard. So for Josh to achieve what he achieved, you know, as much as his life was definitely cut short, he still, you know, inspired many, and his name lives on. I think it will. And it will continue.
Oh, it will definitely. You know, until I take my last breath, I'll let everyone else carry it on after.
Oh, beautiful. So what's next for Alison Cope? Like, what do you have next for us that you're allowed to share?
I will continue telling everybody in my path about Josh, about, you know, who he was, who he became, what happened. I've got my awards evening, which was inspired by Josh. I saw in a lot of the young people I was meeting, you know, excluded from mainstream school, struggling in their own lives. And I just thought, hang on, Joshua had that magic sprinkled on him and was very fortunate in things that he experienced and things he had. And I just wanted to share a bit of that with other young people. So the awards evening is going to be February next year. And that's, again, 22 young people, just given a moment of magic to realise that, you know, you are worthy and as worthy as everybody else. Yes. I've got a book coming out.
Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh. I have to get that one, Alison.
Let's just say it's like somebody's got the script from EastEnders, Hollyoaks and Coronation Street and put it together, because it doesn't just cover the loss of Josh. It covers who am I, why am I the way I am, and when you look at my life, you'll think, it makes more sense now why she's so resilient. And then just continue doing what I'm doing. Hoping to, it's in the pipeline at the moment, whether it comes to happen or not, we'll see. But I've got potentially an international project coming out that's to do with knife crime, but it's very much in the planning stages, so I can't really say a lot about that. But yeah, I won't stop. No chance.
Oh, fantastic. Alison, you've got so much in the pipelines and you've already achieved so much. So thank you for the talk today.
No, thank you so much for speaking to me.
Oh, no, absolutely. And, you know, you've been so open and so honest. And one thing I do love about you is that your compassion as well, it radiates, and, you know, after everything you've been through. And I'm looking forward to hear about your book, because I think we hear so much about you with your campaign with Josh, and that I know that's important to you. And almost like Josh is who, you know, a part of who you are.
Oh, he is. We're still, I think what the book kind of shows, and it for me, it's important that people who maybe are struggling read it and not look, and actually it might be a weird thing to say, to not look at me as an inspiration, to not look at me and think, actually, I wish I was more like her. Because when you look at my life, I mean, just a little snippet of it, I was born in Nigeria.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Can you not tell? So I'm actually originally from Nigeria.
Wow, I cannot tell at all.
I can imagine, you probably can't. It might be the Brummie accent and the very pale skin. But I experienced my first life-changing trauma before the age of 2.
Oh my God.
And I am probably one of the most traumatized, abused and neglected people you'll ever meet. But you probably wouldn't be able to even see that for a second.
You don't look like all the things you've just listed. You don't look like what
There's many, 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 many things that have happened to me, and I am grateful for every bit of pain that came my way, because it enabled me to live a moment without my son.
Wow. So everything that you went through built you up for what you were going to go through.
Yeah. So to be traumatized wasn't such a new experience that it wobbled me. And so when people are traumatized and wobble, we have to respect and understand that, and not look to the inspirational, strong, amazing people as the guide to go by. You know, there are many inspirational people out there that are sitting on the sofa sobbing, who are not looking after themselves, but the fact they are still breathing, they're equally inspirational.
Absolutely.
And my book will show a lot of the stuff that I've been through, and you couldn't actually make it up if you tried.
Well, I'm going to keep an eye out for that book, because I need to get a copy when it comes out.
That's fine. That's not a problem.
I'm sure a lot of other people, fans of Depz, a.k.a. Josh, fans of yourself, and, you know, just about what you're about. I think a lot of people will definitely.
Yeah, because they're nosy.
What's going on? But thank you for sharing that little nugget. I'm still so surprised that you were born in Nigeria. That is
Lagos,
in Lagos as well. Oh my gosh. Wow. Have you been back since?
No, not yet. Not yet. I've had no desire to go back, but who knows? Who knows? You know,
Who knows what the
I
future
might be the
holds?
future Princess Alison somewhere
Yeah,
in Nigeria.
exactly. Or they
Still hope.
may call you to do a speech over there or like an inspirational talk. You never know, Alison.
You never know. But if anyone from Nigeria is watching, I'm here to help.
I've
got my passport ready.
Yes, I'm sure there'll be. I do know a few Nigerians, so that they might be a bit shocked.
No, people are always shocked, but that's what I love, because what would people assume? Whereas, you know, the assumption on people, and you know, so no, originally from Nigeria.
Oh wow! And
yeah,
now you're in the UK. I
know, lucky me, hey. But yeah, so
woo! Thank you so much, Alison, for speaking to us. And
take care.
Take care.
Bye. Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening to today's podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, it doesn't have to stop here. Check out our Instagram at _ponder on that with Saffron, and our Twitter page at podcast_ponder. Feel free to follow us for more inspiration and goodness.